ladies and gentlemen, to Interpretation in Health and Science. It is difficult, but probably very, very rewarding and interesting. That subject matter specifically. You'll find it, I hope. Fundamental purpose of interpreting. Let's start with that, and let's look at this lecture with you together in the reading part. In any field of interpretation, to remove the gap between two individuals who speak different language is mainly the reason why interpreting is significant. Having said that, accurate information, especially in a mental health institute, is such a significant factor. If the interpreter communicates a wrong message, an incorrect diagnosis can be formulated. This is the very reason why the interpreter must be responsible for a precise interpretation. So mentally, basically, you have to be very fit, even if your clients might not be in that case. The communication between two persons who do not speak the same language will not be possible without the help of an interpreter, as you can understand. In a health situation and in a health institution, the healthcare access which a patient may want to avail of is made obtainable through the interpreter. How otherwise? They want to have a service, but they can't communicate. So what is the key purpose of a mental health interpreter? To smooth the progress of the understanding and communication between two people who do not speak the same language, that's your task. What kind of hindrances might be expecting here? Hindrances to precise interpreting. Not only are the untrained interpreters entitled to commit mistakes, professional and skilled interpreters can also make some interpretation flaws, because just like anybody else, these people are subject to prejudices, substantial matters, and feelings. Yes, we know you have feelings. To err is human, but to avoid error is professional. There you go. Yes, there are ways to stay away from and deal with mistakes. Aspects of emotions. Before you go to work, make sure that you leave your personal baggage at home. I mean, you might be having at home also some mental issues with some of your people in your household, but please leave them there. Otherwise, several emotional aspects can affect you as an interpreter. You may have personal or family problems, but these have nothing to do with your interpretation job. Ladies and gentlemen, you might realize that in every single job, leaving the problems of your private life at home is a must, but especially when you deal with people. If your job is based on communication, translation, interpretation, customer service, dealing with clients, talking to people, this is even more necessary. For sure, if you're an artist and have to paint a beautiful picture, then you might also not you'd think of your, wife who was very angry at home and blamed you of drinking more beer than necessary. You can still maybe paint, maybe a bit more in beer color, but it wouldn't probably affect your job too much. But when you have to talk to people, when you have to keep your calm, when you have to keep your sanity, specifically in those situations, you really have to leave everything at home. Having said that, in a mental health setting, considering the condition's nature, clients and clinicians with an interpreter might already experience extra nervousness, which is understandable. As part of the interpreter's job, you have to make them calmer and positive about the possible conclusion. But you have to compose yourself so that tranquility can emanate. Remember, your client's needs are more important than your own. Demanding circumstances, as if the job is not demanding enough as it is. You cannot please everybody. That's the good news. If you are faced with demanding situations and clients, your performance may be affected, for sure. There will always be clients who will make your life difficult and your job too stressful. If you are confronted with people like these, and you know that the quality of your work is at stake, you can advise the client and clinician to find your replacement. Yes, you have a choice to stay away from stress. Nobody can push you doing it. Environmental features. The interpreter must be comfortable in a workplace. For you to serve the client better, the environmental features, room, temperature, lighting, noise, etc. are also to take regard as. I feel here very safe, for example. I like even the lighting, I like my camera, I can talk beautifully, I drink my water. Sometimes we do break here, then we get more air conditioner, then the room is freshed again, and I can start another module. These are my conditions and my environment to be working comfortably. And these factors will somehow have an effect on the interpreter. However, it is good to know that they are easy to deal with. If you feel uncomfortable with regards to any of these environmental features, you should voice out your concern as soon as possible. It is not simply for your benefit, also for the client to have a session that is more successful and not an interpreter who sweats or freezes while doing his job. Speech power. There are clients who are not good speakers. What can you do? They may have a problem with their articulation, even of their native language. There are times that it'll be hard to comprehend what they're talking about, for either they speak too fast or slow and too loud or quiet. If one of them will be your client, your job will be too challenging for an interpreter who is focused on the spoken word. You may fail to notice some words or not perceive sound from the client. Do not get frustrated. Be more patient and take extra effort to understand what your client is saying. If it still does not help, it is proper for you to professionally request the speaker to adjust the rate of speech or volume so that the quality of your interpretation will not be affected. But again, don't forget while doing that, if you are amidst of an interpretation by using the I form, then you should say, excuse me, and then turn to practitioner and the client. Your interpreter wants to have you a little bit more slowlier. Thank you for your understanding. Please continue. Talk about yourself as yourself, like the interpreter. Because if you suddenly say, I want you to speak more slowly, the doctor will think that the client wants to speak, the doctor to speak slowly. So avoid every kind of misinterpretation like that. Substantial issues. Take good care of your health. What? Yes. How can you do your job well if you're sick? You may not be able to focus on the details of your work if you're in poor health. Remember that interpreting is a fast-paced process. You should be alert with all your senses. And if you're not fit to work, do not force yourself to pursue the session. Inform your client right away if you cannot make it for his own benefit. Keep in mind that if you are ill, there is no client, and so your work is affected. Be reminded of the basic health tips. Eat right, have 6 to 8 glasses of water of a day. Now I'm your doctor now. Have sufficient sleep to keep you energized, exercise, and a lot more. And have a nice sleep for sure. Check health magazines and books. This is for your own sake. Be healthy. You can also try some fitness. Type of speaker. Treat all the speakers with due respect. You will encounter different types of people in interpreting sessions, and you may not be aware that your response differs from one person to another. Be professional. Respect the clients and clinicians accordingly. Do not be unfair. Set aside your prejudices. You might have some. Forget about them. You might hate dogs, but somebody is only talking about his dog. What can you do? You shouldn't make faces. You have to think the dog is just an animal. It's just a fact. It's even just a notion, a word. So you can actually train yourself with the things you don't like, just taking them as word, as notion, not as people or animals or creatures. Equal treatment must be rendered at all times. You should refuse to take sides, definitely. Remember to smooth the progress of communication is your job as an interpreter. So, work-related exhaustion. Have a break when you feel exhausted. As much as possible, limit interpreting sessions to 2 hours or less to avoid exhaustion. If you are worn out, the quality of your work may be affected. Know your body. You must be conscious of when you need some air, some fresh air. Otherwise, you may not comprehend what the speaker said, or you may become inattentive and forgetful. Be responsible enough to let the client and the clinician know that you need a break. Responsibilities of the interpreter. There are 4 basic responsibilities of a professional interpreter in a huge number of circumstances. Advocate. For constructive encouragement, familiarity of client privileges, and the healthcare structure are necessary. It means you have to be familiar with all that. Interpreters also serve as a client advocate. Do I have to defend them? No. Wait, how? When you take measures to guarantee the clients obtain what they want or to get their privileges, you're helping them as their advocate by actually interpreting them. For case in point, in the course of a mental health meeting, you work for a patient with an LEP having difficulty understanding matters on medical insurance, and you wish to seek help on his behalf. You, as an interpreter, should be very careful about when to be of help and how much assistance to give as an advocate. You may frequently see yourself as connection in the series that guides to excellent client care in mental health institute or other areas, being a professional interpreter in helping roles. Be very careful. Know your client's limitations and your own. And here a suggestion, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to do so, if you are dealing with a mental illness or any disturbance, let's say, or maybe a condition, please get informed about what kind of a situation that is. If somebody has, say, autism, but still can talk, you should exactly know, not as much as a doctor, but almost, at least exactly know what the rest of the public knows, through internet, through library, through whatever sources you can get, learn about that condition. Otherwise, you might be misinterpreting anything she or he might be saying. So it's always, specifically when you actually deal with some problems like mental problems, you should be definitely having information about it. And this is not a big deal. Otherwise, again, you might not know what he or she means. That's why we always say here, legal and medical interpretation requires a lot of background research, almost as a competent, if you are already a healthcare professional, very good. If you are already a lawyer, very good as well. But if you're not, but you inform yourself, you prepare yourself, you do the actual necessary research, you might still get there. And if you're interested, if you're curious enough, please get informed. Nowadays, we live in an information age. Everything is under our fingers, actually. Just a bit of keys to touch. Do that. It's worth. And then your second task, your second responsibility, channel. It's the interpreter's responsibility as a channel of communication to translate one language into another precisely. Interpreters should just convey the message presented by the client or clinician. No words should be cancelled, shortened, or edited, especially in a mental health setting. As an interpreter, you have to take note that it's not your duty to cut the client off or redirect the discussion. If client speaks for a long period of time or gives inappropriate information, the clinician is the one responsible to take care of the situation. Again, we are here dealing with a not very functionally working mental problem or mind. The clinician is the one who is responsible, we said. It's given fact that the common role of an interpreter is to be just a channel. Clarifier. It's the interpreter's responsibility to shed light on matters between two parties. Interpreter becoming a clarifier depends on the situation. If misapprehension arises between a client and clinicians, it's the only time the interpreter assumes the responsibility as a clarifier. In a situation like the patient does not understand the interpreted message, the interpreter can use visual aids like word pictures to make clear thoughts that are unusual to the client. Cultural agent, that's what you're too. There are cases when clinicians are strange with the information the patient is talking about due to their cultural differences. We always talk about the cultural meaning and cultural transmitting. That's exactly it. Everywhere when you translate or interpret. Interpreters do not only convey message, but they can be cultural agents at times. When interpreters provide a clinician the client's cultural viewpoint for a better communication, the interpreters are acting like cultural agents. For instance, in Latino culture, there are two diseases that are usually noted. Mal de ojo, which means evil eye, and refers to illness that occurs from definite social relations, and susto, or soul loss, that's a difficulty caused by a terrifying experience in which spirits confine the soul of a person. There you go. You as an interpreter are also responsible to explain these concepts for the clinicians to accurately attend the client's needs. You can give a clinician the possibility to be aware of and to efficiently take action to urgent needs of client when you explain the characteristics of home medicines, mindsets, subject matters, and the like of certain cultures. Yeah, in some countries there are some thoughts about spirituality, or some maybe even metaphysics can get involved. In that case, you have to be factually translating and explaining, not defending it, not putting any prejudice on it, like with a ironic smiles as she's talking that the jinns and the foreign creatures are invading his brain, or not like that. You just factually, with a poker face, and talk about the fact, and also you already are informed about it, we assume, whatever the client would be talking about, so you can actually pass on this information to the clinician. And interpreting is not simply translating words of different languages. To become a good interpreter, you may start with understanding and absorbing each of your responsibilities. When the time comes that you can effortlessly do your roles, you are on your way to be an exceptional interpreter, and hopefully then remember good old Layla who was talking to you here. In addition, you have to be aware of entire discussion and encourage understanding that contributes to client care excellence. You have to take note that many meetings need interpreters to work only as a channel. On the other hand, you as an interpreter have to do one responsibility after the other within just single session. You have to be ready anytime, which means not every single responsibility would be asked in one session in every case. But you might be ready for doing that or that, being flexible and aware. Responsibilities to stay away from while interpreting, so what you should not do. In professional interpreting relations, you need to be aware of not only the interpreter's responsibilities, but also those roles which you have to stay away from. As much as possible, you should keep away from the client's close family member or friend. Persons who will assure of the clinicians' and customers' convenience, a social worker and the like. Avoid taking on roles that can obscure your purpose. You have to remember this pointer as an interpreter who connects the communication gap between two persons. This is your main goal, main role. To convey messages from one person to another and vice versa is the major responsibility of an interpreter. As a professional interpreter, you do not need to give an emotional support and to assure an optimistic mental health result to your client, nor promise a harmonious relationship between clinicians and clients. Again, you are an interpreter. You are not the client's close family member or friend. You're not also a social worker, are you? If you are, that can be. You might say maybe one of you guys is already a healthcare personnel there, a social worker. As long as you take on the interpreter's coat or scrub, you are just an interpreter. Don't mix it up. Because why am I saying that? Because we were actually talking about sometimes in the very beginning, in the subject areas of healthcare or law, you might be already in the business. You might even be a doctor. You might be a healthcare personnel. You can be a nurse, you know, speaking 2 or 3 languages fluently and also aware of the medical English and everything. In case that you are hired or asked to become an interpreter, in that moment you are only an interpreter. That's what it says here, so don't mix it up. Do not feel guilty if you cannot play those roles to your client, if you are one. It is not your responsibility to befriend your client, for it may affect your credibility as an interpreter, for sure. Nobody believes you. Then, be professional to give a precise and efficient interpretation. You have to put your attention to the foremost objective of interpretation. It is important to understand your responsibility as an interpreter to avoid disappointments that you may encounter. It can happen, ladies and gentlemen. It differs from country to country. It can happen that one of the healthcare workers or doctors or nurses in the same hospital accidentally speaks fantastically the client's language and has done an interpretation job before and can be asked to do so for the same institution, for their clients. Especially in that case, the client shouldn't think that you are representing the hospital if you already work there. I know it's very difficult. That's your challenge. You should keep your neutrality, you should keep your, that's a very interesting word, you should keep your impartiality, and you should be totally neutral. Neither the doctor would think or should think that you are the client's real advocate in there, like a lawyer in that case, or defender or friend, nor the client should think that you are working for the doctor. So interpreter is interpreter. It's a totally neutral area. Having said that, general mistakes in interpreting. Proper education can keep you from making mistakes, but not all interpreters have undergone formal training that leads them to numerous errors. Below, here, are some general mistakes we can talk about that can possibly take place without proper interpretation education. Now listen. The interpreter put in details that have not been mentioned by the speaker. For all your own. You add things to the speech. No. The interpreter shortens or sums up the message relayed by the client in lieu of giving a thorough interpretation. Whoops, make a summary. Never do that. The interpreter communicates a message in a manner that its meaning is misused. Again, your tone, your character, how you see the issue. That's why it's important to be neutral. Because if you are not neutral, and if you have a value issue there, or if you have a prejudice, again, one smile, one expression of your face, one intonation, stressing one word more than the other can change the meaning. Now you can understand how important it is to be the neutral. There are some examples I want to go through with you. It looks fun, but it's actually embarrassing. The clinician says, "Do you have an allergy to any medication?" Interpreter: "Do you vomit when you take medicines from other countries?" Client: "No." Now, do you think that the client doesn't have any allergies? No. Maybe he has rash. Do you know that? Because the question here talks about vomiting. But the doctor didn't ask that. The doctor is talking about a general allergy. So don't go with your own mind that allergy can cause vomiting, so I have asked that. No. Please translate what the doctor said. The interpreter exaggerates the speaker's relayed message. Example, client, I am happy that I chose to migrate in Canada. Interpreter, I am thrilled that my husband and I moved in Canada. We have a better environment now. We are excited for the winter season. Oh la la, you're writing a novel there. The lady didn't say that. So pay attention to that there. Or another one, the interpreter is incapable of translating commonly used non-literal sayings from one language to the other. Clinician asking, tell me, what does this phrase mean to you? A rolling stone gathers no moss. Interpreter, when you hear that a stone is rolling and no grass is growing on it, what does it mean to you? But nobody would understand what that means. The client does not know how to say. She's confused about how stones and grass relate to each other, and her mental health, the reason why she is not sure how to answer the client's question. Even, ladies and gentlemen, when an interpreter asks a question like that, even a healthy mental person would be thinking, wait a minute, I don't even know who I am anymore. So pay attention. This is a delicate issue. There is no joking about it. You go really with the phrase, with the word. You can explain the phrase in that case. You remember, we were also doing it with translation. If we don't know the exact words, we put a bracket or a parenthesis to explain. In this language, it means la la la. You can do that in interpretation too, instead of recreating the idiom or phrase in an ununderstandable way. Okay, having said that, number 6. The interpreter does not precisely reiterate the words of the speaker that can lead to erroneousness and not excellent paraphrasing. Client, I have been very worried and irritable recently. Occasionally I get headaches too. Interpreter, I have anxiety and I get headaches. Whew. Anxiety. She didn't say that. I've been a little bit worried and irritable is something totally different. Specifically when we talk about mental illness, anxiety is something it's a diagnosis. I mean, you're diagnosing already without the clinician heard the story of the patient. This is never, no. 7. The interpreter suggests justification for the nonverbal actions of the client. Clinician, how is your sexual activity? Client makes a half smile and she does not say anything at all. Interpreter, I think she's uncomfortable to discuss this topic right now, but don't worry, she will get back to your question in a short while. How do you know that? Maybe she was just thinking about, oh my God, this doctor is asking that. It was so long ago that I had any partner. Maybe it's time to have one again. Maybe she thought about this. How do you know this? Okay. Interpreter, I think she omits a message partly or totally. Instead of doing his own role, the interpreter takes over somebody else's role in the interpreting session, such as doing a client interview or giving reactions on the source's explanations. Yeah, it happens actually when you're in the beginning. I hope that never happens to you, but you get too much involved. So you suddenly get intrigued with the case and you're losing your impartiality by, being a part of it almost. You're being in the scene suddenly. No, you're just watching and just transferring the issue. You're not mid in the scene. Okay. There's an example here with the interpreter substitutes one thought with another. Clinician, do you hear voices? Interpreter, do you hear noises? Voice and noise are the same word in Chinese. By the way, in Turkish too. I suddenly see it and think about my mother language. Yes, but when the doctor asks, do you hear voices to somebody who might be potentially mentally ill, it has a totally different way of asking. Even in Turkish, where the two words are the same. Like we ask off nowhere or out of the blue. We add something to this same word, so that it means differently, and you have to have this cultural interpretation and not just saying the words in case, because we assume in that case that you are fluent in Chinese and fluent in English. And then for sure, and when you ask noises, maybe the client hearing the word noises might think that the doctor wants to know whether she's being bothered by some environmental noises like the neighbors and the street, and then the client goes, yes, I often hear noises, you know, my place is right before a busy street. And now the doctor is confused and getting probably mentally ill, because he would know how to interpret this now in the other sense of interpretation, which means how to make meaning to it. Due to lack of knowledge with mental health ideas, the interpreter hinders the evaluation procedures of the clinician. For example, clinician, what type of temper you lately have been in? Interpreter asks, how have you been feeling? Look at the answer. Most of the time I feel like I have headache. Because when you say feeling, everything is involved. Feeling sick, having a headache, or being worried, or everything. Whereas, what do you think the question is here? What type of temper you lately have been in? Mood. The doctor is asking the mood, and the client is answering the headache. For sure, after the headache, he might be in a different mood, but it's not being asked or answered that way. It says in here, the interpreter does not perform his communication function to connect the cultural gaps between the client and the clinician. For example, client, early this morning I had the whole bottle of 60 Potia pills. Interpreter, early this morning I had the whole bottle of Potia pills. Interpreter does not let the client explain that the user must take the whole bottle of this Chinese pill. And since the doctor has not been informed about it, the clinician goes, did you try to get rid of yourself? So he thinks the client wants to commit suicide. There you go. And then there is memory abilities. All forms of memory are used during the course of interpretation. Yes, memory has different kinds. There are 3 of them: very short-term memory, and long-term memory. Very short-term memory allows a person to keep in his head a precise series of numbers for about 4 to 8 seconds. But the numbers are naturally not remembered when the mentioned time has gone by. So, secondly, short-term memory is a more complicated kind. It permits the ideas and concepts preservation. Lastly, long-term memory can store what has been discovered in the past, so the information retains over a long period of time. When they uncover different approaches to hone memory preservation ability, interpreters become improved in their profession. So as long as you can train your memory, short or long, and do some exercises about it, it's like an actor memorizing the lines. I mean, they're also probably were not able to do that before they became an actor. As you see here, every single career path educates you better, actually offers you self-development. Through that path or career, you get to know yourself better. You discover yourself. Each time another part of you. And now here with the memory. Maybe if you were just a teacher or even just a politician, you wouldn't probably need that much memory because they're giving some promises and forgetting them anyway. So apparently they don't need some memory, some of politicians. But here, as an interpreter, you need one. So, when they uncover different approaches to hone memory preservation ability, interpreters become improved in their profession. Very short-term memory is not that important to the interpreter. Long-term memory improvement needs wide-ranging practice and learning over time. Because of this, it has a propensity to be of limited significance to interpreting industry. Among the 3 kinds of memory, the one that can be of best help to interpreters in the short-time memory when improved. Interpreters rely to this memory the most when conveying messages. And can you imagine being a simultaneous interpreter? then you need your short time, very short time memory even. While listening, you are hearing. While talking, you are hearing, translating, talking. It's kind of a vicious circle, and your memory is going to work like that. Don't worry about it. They are not unhumans. All these people who are succeeding in that business started like you, went there, did that, and became very successful. Okay. Constant and frequent trainings done customarily are needed in order to increase short-term memory faculty. There are several methods interpreters can put into practice within the session course. Some of them are as follows. Count up. Don't count the sheep though, then you might be falling asleep. As an interpreter, you can make in your head a numbered record of a few matters stated by the client which you have to be interpreted. The clinician may ask the client, for instance, do you have in your family any history of asthma, diabetes, or cancer? It will be easier for you, that's just a suggestion, a method. It will be easier for you as an interpreter to memorize the whole thing that was mentioned if you assign a number to each illness and make a listing in your head. Say, asthma for 1, diabetes for 2, cancer for 3. Focus. Before the session starts, try to have some meditation. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I could actually have another lecture with the topic meditation, because that is so important in many, many ways in our lives and many, many walks in our lives, basically. If you can do it, this is going to change your life forever. But that's another time. Hopefully, I'll be teaching that too one day. This will help you as an interpreter to get focused. Concentrate on the words and messages you are to relay. You can also close your eyes to avoid distraction or center your attention on anything that will make you focus better within the context of the session. Clear your mind and remove all feelings and thoughts which are not connected to your interpretation work. Now you're ready to give your full attention to the speaker. That's actually, without me preparing the curriculum and starting, which can take a long time, you can actually research, like everything you have to research, you can research that too. I definitely suggest go and learn how to focus, like a meditation, how to clear up your mind. There are 1,000 activities and opportunities out there. Find them. Yes, you should be a researcher, looking for her, and as curious as a cat without being killed. Imagine, like you're watching your favorite movie, imagine the situation as it's being narrated. As an interpreter, it will help you efficiently remember the events, and you can interpret them easily for the other person. To recall a series of occasions, imagine the events being conversed. A client might say, for instance, each time I anticipate for a significant video or phone call, I experience my nervousness increase. I was expecting a conference call the other day from my client at 10 a.m. I couldn't finish my report because I started to lose my focus at 7 a.m. Then I began to perspire more and my palms were covered with sweat at around 8:30 a.m. And I had to use the washroom every 10 minutes, an hour before the conference call. Wow. You can try to imagine the client with a blank face, looking at the clock from time to time. Her hands are both wet, like a movie, and always rushing to the washroom together with 10 a.m. and 72 font bold letters on a big screen. 10 a.m. What do you think? Interpretation is much easier, eh? Just imagine. Really, it's kind of role-playing in your own brain. Okay, repeat. An interpreter must repeat in his head the key phrases in the message relayed by the client. This is another way of good recall. Check the paragraph below. Notice the words in boldface that you may want to repeat in your head as an interpreter while you listen to the message. Ladies and gentlemen, this is actually a technique we are using also in language teaching. Maybe some of you guys have experienced some of the proficiency tests if English is not your mother language. If English is your mother language, then you might maybe learned another language and had that test for that language required. This is kind of called basically scanning. scanning and getting the keywords, the very important keywords out of the copy the client might be talking. Look at this one here. I can't remember how it all began. Began. I used to not having headaches before. However, nearly past the quiet few months, I've been experiencing them often. So I'm giving you the bold ones louder, because these are the keywords you should be remembering. That's another method to focus. And they make me suffer sore ache and a number N for few hours. Sore ache. You know, like that. So, as your job as an interpreter, you have to relay every detail that is mentioned. Although, by repeating the keywords in your mind, you will generate neural pathways so you can locate again those keywords more effortless, because your mind kind of records them with the same intensity and density, like boldly written, boldly talked, boldly heard, and correctly and accurately translated. That's it, or interpreted. Take notes. Just like a reporter, jot down notes. Yes, because it will help you recall things like names, numbers, dates, keywords. Don't worry, for you are permitted to take notes as an interpreter, but consider your clients also. Be polite. Before every session begins, ask your client if it is all right with her for you to write some notes. You have to guarantee your client that every note you're going to take down will be for the purpose of specific session only, and that is highly confidential, that you will dispose of right away as soon as the session ends. You wouldn't let anything out there, you know, laying around. Nobody should ever know anything about your interpretation session other than the parties involved with. Okay, this will make your note-taking easier. Shorthand. We are talking about shorthand. Yes. If you can take up actually not only meditation but shorthand courses, that helps you too, because you can write them in very short time and memorize easily. You can prepare personal shorthand terms for a specific topic or specific client. They will surely help you a lot. Now, through the use of a shortened technique, you can allow the speaker to talk for a long period of time without breaking off the flow of message while you do the interpretation. It can be almost like going like simultaneously instead of very long consecutive interpretation we were talking about. Make it a habit to always use shorthand in every interpreting session. When you enhance this technique, you will not notice that you're getting you will not notice that not only that you're getting better and better. So always practice. Practice makes the interpretation perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, a very last word for that. Be prepared. Be prepared means be informed. Be informed means be curious. And all that means you will also have evolved at the end of each session. You learn more. With every interpretation you learn something more. Because, why? Because you have done the preparation, you have done the research, and after that everything has actually really happened. Imagine you were exactly like I said, you were like going through the interpretation of an autistic person. You read about autism, then you have experienced it, maybe had a pre-interview, and then talked to the clinician, maybe a pre-interview, and then you had the parties together, and then you hopefully were able to bridge the conversation between them. At the end, after each session, after for sure you have done the paperwork and everything, and also satisfied the accounting and your boss and everything, when you go home, you are a different person because you had a different experience. I would say good luck, but we're not finished yet. See you next time.